Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. Today I wanted to make a really interesting video that I think a lot of you will actually find helpful. I've been debating making like a full video about this for a while because I've seen a few of them out there on the internet, but I think that coming from me, it would be a very good idea to do this because I've been seeing so many misconceptions in my DMs, in my comments, and I think that it will be very educational. So today I'm going to take the time to give you guys a really in-depth explanation of what the difference is between interior design and interior decorating, because there's a lot. Before I get into it, I just want to explain why this is important, because a lot of people will probably be like, who the heck cares? But I do, so I want to explain that. The first main reason that I really care about this is because I have a lot of people who look up to me and who are always messaging me or commenting that they want to be like me when they grow up, or that they want to do the career that I do. And so I want to make it explicitly clear that although I am a designer, a lot of what I do on TikTok that is accessible to other people is decorating. And I don't want anyone entering an education or doing different things that will make them think that they will reach a certain career when it's actually going to lead them to a different career. I also just think that like the whole career of interior design or interior architecture is not talked about enough. I think that a lot of people don't view it as a viable career path and they think it's just an art major. So I think that it's really important to kind of release that stigma because you can make a lot of money as a designer. I think another reason why it's really important to me is just because I didn't know about interior design when I was applying to colleges and all of that stuff. I didn't know the differences, and so for me it was really confusing, and I think a lot of people view interior design as a not viable career path. A lot of people view it as, oh, you have to have your own business or do like a small business type thing, and people view it as an art major when it's really 100% not. So I just really want this information to be out there. I want people to know what they're getting themselves into, and I want people to know what title they should be. And I will say that the stigma can be frustrating to interior designers themselves. I think that a lot of times people devalue their work and don't take their career seriously because they think it is what it's not. And so I think this is really important for all of my designer friends out there to kind of make their story be heard. There are so many different layers to this too, and I think another layer is just that if you're trying to hire someone for your space and you don't know what you really want, it's really helpful to know the difference between a designer and a decorator to know what you're asking for. But the big main reason why all of this even matters beyond my own personal thoughts and opinions on the subject is safety. There are a lot of safety precautions that you learn in school to become an interior designer, and if you don't have that education, but you're telling people that you are an interior designer, it could lead to a lot of safety issues and danger, which you wouldn't even know that it would happen, but it's there. So let's get into all of these different differences. But before I start, I do want to say who I am. So if you don't know anything about me, I'm an interior designer. I went to Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts. It is a CETA and NASAD accredited program. I went for 4 years and I got my bachelor's degree, and it was a very intense program. Now I will get more into my qualifications and also what I do for work towards the end of the video, but I just wanted to put that out there so you don't think I'm just some random person researching interior design on the internet. So let's start out by defining what interior design is. So interior design is actually an interchangeable term with interior architecture. So there's no difference. If you picture in your mind like one big commercial office building, so that would be designed by an architect. They would design the exterior of the building, and they would design the center core of the building that keeps everything sturdy, and they know all of that kind of intense stuff. So once they have designed just this open building, they will hand it over to the interior designers. So what are interior designers qualified to do? They are qualified to do architectural drawings and use those computer programs. The programs that you learn in school for interior architecture are very intense, and a lot of times it takes all 4 years of your education to figure out how to work them, and then so on. When you're in a firm, they will teach you even more that you didn't even know. But they are intense. It's not just like The Sims where you're just placing furniture in. It has a lot to do with measurements. It has a lot to do with what is inside of those elements too. So you can click on a wall and see the makeup of that wall and see what's inside of there, and it's just a lot more in depth. When I was in school for interior architecture, I started by learning AutoCAD, and then we started getting into the 3D space. We tested out the waters with SketchUp just to kind of get familiar with computer programs, and then we ended up going into Revit. So I have a pretty extensive knowledge base in Revit, and then also Enscape, which is what I like to use to make my renderings look really realistic. You can also use that with SketchUp. There are other programs that other schools like to specialize in too and share with their students, like Rhino and Lumion, and there's so many different ones, but for me, I learned Revit, and that is kind of like an industry standard. Most firms use Revit. So interior designers have that background. They also are just able to do architectural drawings. There are so many different drawings that you have to do for architecture, and I'm not talking about like a sketch of a space. I'm talking about like big floor plans that have everything labeled, everything organized, lighting, electrical, HVAC, so many different things. Interior designers are there for the construction process, so they have that knowledge. They communicate with architects, they communicate with everyone, and they just know how it all goes down. What I would argue is the most important thing that an interior designer knows is building codes. So building codes are like a set of standards and rules that have to happen in a building, specifically public buildings, because depending on what state you're in, residential, there's so many different ways you can get around these things. It's not always safe, but there's different things grandfathered in, all this other type of stuff. But when it comes to commercial construction, there are so many different rules, and these rules are there for a lot of different reasons. For ADA, so that people who are handicapped can also use the space, or just for general safety, knowing certain things, knowing certain distances between exits, knowing all of these different things will make sure that people in some sort of catastrophe will be alive when it's over. Being an interior designer means that you know the different classifications for materials, which make them more fireproof or not, what you can put in a space so that it doesn't just combust into flames when something is lit on fire. There's just so many different layers to building codes and what is required to make a space safe that you wouldn't even know if you didn't have that education, so that way you may be potentially putting people in danger. So if you go back to what I said earlier about the big open space that an interior designer has to work with, a lot of that includes walls and space planning. Interior designers know how to work around columns. They know what is necessary for the user when it comes to space planning, where all of the walls should be placed and what type of wall it needs to be. And a lot of that has to do with adjacencies and efficiency. So everyone always asks me on TikTok, they're like, how do you know how to come up with these different efficient furniture things or these different things that make everything so convenient? And although I do have a passion for that kind of stuff, I know it because I learned it in school. So in addition to all of these construction drawings that an interior designer has to produce with these high-tech computer programs, they also need to come up with lists of FF&E. FF&E stands for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and it's really important to have a list of all of those things and their qualifications and why they meet the standard when you're submitting a design. So when an interior designer is selecting a furniture item, they are looking at the quality of that item, they're looking at the fire retardancy, they're looking at all of these different elements of that furniture item. Materials can be measured by how many swipes it takes for it to wear down, and those are the types of things that interior designers are looking at. And when they're putting together these construction drawings and the FF&E, they're able to make it in a way that is a standard that someone who's doing construction can look at these drawings and know what's happening and easily make that space come to life. Obviously, for a lot of these things, there are architects that will then take the plans from the designers and review them. There's a lot of different reviews that happen to make sure that everything is good, because you can't just rely on one person and their knowledge base, but to be an interior designer, you have to have that knowledge base. Another layer when it comes to furniture and other things like that is ergonomics. So when you're in school for interior design, you learn about that and you learn about what is comfortable for the human body. There's also a layer of environmental impact knowledge that you have to have with sustainability and all of that. You learn, I had so many courses in sustainability and just like the life cycle of different things that you're putting into your design. Because if you're designing for someone else, you have to know the environmental impact, and there's different stamps of approval that specifically for commercial buildings, they want a certain stamp of approval to be able to say our building is LEED gold or LEED silver or something like that. And then for a designer, there's also the added layer of history. So we have to learn about design styles. We have to learn about the history behind those styles. I did a lot of art history and a lot of architectural history courses while I was in school, because it's important to know what came before. It's important to know what goes together, what works together, and what different types of people might want in their space. And of course, lastly, interior designers know about color theory. They know about all of those types of things. We have a lot of classes on aesthetics and color theory and how different colors will make you change your perception of these different spaces. Part of those types of studies also are the elements and principles of design, like emphasis in a space, or like line, or like there's so many. I'm just gonna probably put them on the screen. I'm not gonna just kind of take flashcards right now, but there's all of those different layers too, that when you learn those things, you develop an eye for design and you're able to kind of see what makes a space look good versus what doesn't. So to call yourself an interior designer, you have to have that education so that you're not fooling anyone, but in a lot of states you also have to have a certification. That certification that you need is called the NCIDQ, which stands for the National Council of Interior Design Qualification, I think. There's a lot of steps to the NCIDQ, but basically you have to take one part and then be in a firm, have that site experience for 2 years, and then you take the second part of the NCIDQ exam. So are there interior designers that have not taken the NCIDQ that are still able to be called interior designers? The answer is yes. It depends on what state you live in. I actually had an internship once where the woman who was in charge of everything was not NCIDQ certified, but she did not have to be in the state that she was in, and she was well overqualified. So it just kind of depends on everything. So I've talked about design, let's get into decorating. So what does a decorator do? A decorator focuses on the aesthetic. So a decorator could be someone who is selecting furniture for your home, or they could be someone who has an extensive knowledge about color, and so they're helping you pick the right color for your space, and they probably know some of the elements and principles of design as well. They are just making your space beautiful. Decorators tend to have an extensive knowledge in textiles, in texture, in all of these different things that will make a space really come together. They know about accessories, they know what works well together. So if you are someone who doesn't know what to put on your gallery wall, or if you're someone who has all of your space set up already but it just isn't pretty, that's when you would bring in a decorator. You don't necessarily have to have an education to be a decorator. Obviously, the more that you learn or you teach yourself is better, because then you know that the space will objectively come out beautiful. But a lot of decorating has to do with just your eye for things, and some people get it and some people don't, if that makes sense. And typically, obviously, a decorator gets it. There's like this line that kind of gets meshed also between decorators and DIYers. So DIY is like a completely different realm of things, which is typically self-taught from what I've seen on the internet. Typically DIYers didn't take any sort of construction class. The best DIYers that you will find are people who actually know about carpentry or went to trade school or just anything like that. They actually know what they're talking about, but a vast majority of the people on the internet who do DIYs do not have that experience. I do not have that experience, so I taught myself how to use the tools. So obviously there's certain things that I feel like I have an advantage with when it comes to DIY, because I have a lot of extensive knowledge in materiality and what works and what doesn't, and I also know a lot about aesthetics, but I'm not a carpenter, and a carpenter knows best. So that's why I always try to caution people to kind of do their own research for their own space, or if you're looking at a DIY account that is doing something that may be a little questionable, maybe look into it, because they probably don't have all of the knowledge that they need to be referring those certain projects to a mass audience. So a question I've seen too is, can interior designers also be decorators? And the answer is yes, you can take the decorator path after you get an interior design degree. Like I said, decorators don't necessarily need an education to be a decorator, and you do have a pretty extensive knowledge about decor when you come out of a design degree. So if anything, they're probably overqualified to be a decorator when you come out of design. But just remember, it is pretty subjective to say if someone can be a good decorator or not, but it is not very subjective to be a designer. You kind of need that skill set. Every time that I've ever talked about this too, I've gotten a lot of feedback that people feel like designers are just scared of being called decorators, and it's like this stigma. And I want to remind everyone that there's nothing wrong with being a decorator. It just means that you have different passions and interests. Some people just really want to make a space beautiful, and they don't care at all about where the outlets are. They don't care about all of these different codes and regulations. They just want to make a space pretty, and that is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It really is just two different fields of work that should not be mixed together because it can lead to so much confusion. And I think none of it really bothers me until I see something where it's like an online course and they're like, take this class for 1 week and you'll be an interior designer. And those kind of do frustrate me because, again, it just kind of comes back to that safety thing where people are being tricked into thinking that they are an interior designer, and they think that they can apply for a job at a firm, and they think that they can do all of these things because they took a week-long course, when in reality you need a very extensive education to be able to do those things. So I think that's kind of where the frustration lies for a lot of people in the field. I think that we just want everyone to be safe and not trying to do things that they're not qualified to do. Now, there are so many different jobs that you can get as an interior designer or with someone who has an interior design education. It is literally insane. I don't even know off the top of my head all of them, but there are literally so many. The most common track, obviously, that someone who has an interior design degree would take is to enter a firm. My education was very commercial based, so my track would have been to enter a commercial firm, which I kind of did, but obviously if you guys know my story, there was the pandemic and all of that, and now I'm a TikToker, but typically you will enter a firm like that that is already established with connections to architects and construction and all of that kind of stuff, and you will just kind of learn the ropes from the people above you and climb up the ladder. But that's not the only thing that you can do, because there are so many different possibilities with the education that you had, especially if it was an accredited education. You learned a lot because they stuff a lot in for those accreditations. You could be someone who specializes in electrical plans. You could be a lighting designer. You take classes on lighting and how that even happens, like where the light even comes from. You could be a lighting designer. You could be a sales consultant, which is kind of one of the most fun jobs ever because you are someone who works with like a fabric company, and you get to go to these firms and have lunches with them and give them presents and lunch and become friends with all of them and like sell your product to them. And I always was kind of a little bit jealous of the salespeople because they like had that background in design, but they also just like got to have fun all the time, and they make a lot of money too. You could be a drafts person who makes all of the floor plans. You could specialize in the computer programs also. You could go into real estate with a bunch of extensive knowledge. You could be a project manager. You could be a set designer. You could focus on sustainability and be a sustainability consultant. There are just so many different layers to what you could be with an interior design degree, and that's why I always like to recommend it, because even if you don't know exactly what you want to do yet, as long as you know that you're passionate about interiors and just like the aesthetic side of things, there are so many different career paths that you could take. And I want to erase the stigma that interior designers make no money, because that is just not true, and I see that all the time, and it's just not the case. Especially if you live in a big city and you're working in a really big firm, the pay is pretty good. Starting salaries are pretty good, and they just keep going, and it's not like you're just having your own small business and pinching pennies to be an interior designer. It's not like that. So I want to just circle back to kind of what I do for any of my followers who are watching this who might be a little bit confused about how to get a design from me or anything like that. So I am an interior designer. I went to school at Endicott College. I got my degree in interior architecture. I was there for 4 years and I kind of graduated. It was a pandemic, so I didn't have a graduation, but you know what I mean. So obviously I was fresh out of college when everything kind of hit the fan. I was going to work at a big architecture firm in Boston, but things didn't end up really working out for me there. So I ended up just kind of posting on TikTok to pass the time. And that is when my TikTok blew up because I renovated my parents' house for them. So that's kind of how I launched into the space of DIY and decorating, because it's a little bit more difficult to share interior design on the internet than it is to share interior decorating. I do try to share it here and there, but a lot of what I share today is decorating because I'm not always able to just completely rework a building from scratch on TikTok. So because I have such an extensive background in these computer programs, that's something that I'm very passionate about and I like to keep doing. I was actually a peer tutor for Revit, so I really like working with the computer programs, and so I like to do virtual design too on my platform. So whether that be me about to renovate a space, I will show it in actual form, or maybe just because I'm trying to show my idea about what a space could look like. I love doing that kind of stuff, and I love also using that as a way to give back to the people who support me with free designs for their spaces of what I would like to see, or what I would do if it was mine. I get questions all the time about if I have rates or how I can design someone's space, and I just want to remind everyone that I am just one person. Unfortunately, I'm not with a firm right now. I am not a big chain of people who can do a design for you. I'm just one person who's making content about interior design. Because you guys are supporting me here on Instagram and on TikTok, I'm able to make this a full-time career for myself and just kind of share the things that I know as a designer to a lot of people, and I love that. I love the accessibility. I love kind of getting rid of that glass door with interior design and letting people who wouldn't have any exposure to it be exposed to it. But for that reason, I don't have like a way for you to commission a design from me. I don't have rates. I don't do that. But I do have an email called dmdiy where it's like you DM me and I make a DIY, you know, that kind of thing. I have an email for that, or you can just DM me. That's how it originally started, but my DMs are just so flooded that I made this email and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But again, I'm just one person, so I can't be responding to every single person. I love the idea of the email because then I can set up automatic responses so people can hear where I'm at and all of that kind of stuff. But every once in a while when I have free time, I just go through my email or I go through my DMs and I'll select someone whose story really sticks out to me or who I just have a really grand idea for their space, and I'll make a little just design for them and I'll post it on my socials. So that is how I go about doing that. I'm really sorry I can't design for you all, can't take commissions, but that is how it works. So I hope that you guys found this video really helpful. I hope you learned a few things. If you have any questions, comment them down below. I'm sure other decorators and designers will have other input too. They may comment and add things that I may have forgotten, because I definitely did forget some things about both professions, I bet, because this is just me rambling. But I hope that you guys found this video helpful, and I hope that for those of you who have been watching me and saying that you want to do something that I do in the future, I hope that this video helps you kind of hone down on what you actually want to do and what type of career path you want to follow, because there's so many different options that you can do, whether it's designing, decorating, DIY. The whole world is your oyster, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But if there's one note that I want to end this video on, if you want to go to an accredited interior design program, just make sure that you are a very motivated and ready person, because it's hard. And I'm not gonna lie about that. Maybe I'll make a whole video about that, but it's hard. It's a lot. I'm still nocturnal from when I went to school. But anyways, thank you guys so much for being here. I will see you all next week for some more design stuff. Bye guys.